Welcome. Today, we are talking about grief and learning, identity and belonging, such important topics because grief happens to all of us personally, professionally, and it's a topic that we don't bring up about enough because there's so many confusing negative emotions related to it. And that's why we have Lydia Ivy, who is a leader in biotech, biopharma, to share a little bit of her personal grief experience, both professionally, personally, and how she's used her voice to handle and deal with all of that, because it is a lot. So thank you so much, Lydia, for coming on and being willing to share with us today.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm glad that you reached out. And I do think it's important to talk about things that people may not regularly talk about so that we can have the courage to do it more often.
Very well said. We don't talk about things that are difficult, and then we suffer as a result. Sometimes we retrieve, and that's not healthy for us or for others. So let's start with what's happened to you in terms of grief. What's grief to you? How have you experienced grief?
Oh, what a good question and what a great story to share. It started with joy. Let's start there. Last year was a really big year for me. I was planning a wedding, so was get married to the love of my life, my husband, and the wedding was going to be in December. In July, we found out that we were expecting, so that I was pregnant, and it was really exciting. It was very early. It was the first time we'd ever gotten pregnant after passively trying for a while. And so that was really exciting. So there was the wedding, the pregnancy, the joy experience with that. We went to the doctor a couple times, and the first time we went to the doctor, they were a little bit concerned because they didn't see the baby as far along as they wanted it to be, but they were hopeful. They were like, maybe it's just a lot earlier than we thought. And we're like, okay, great. We went back in about, I think, 2 weeks or so, and unfortunately, there was no progress. There was nothing happening. And so it was essentially deemed miscarriage. And so I had to make the hard choice of, do I have the D&C to have it removed? Do I take the abortion pill to get rid of a wanted pregnancy, or do I wait it out? And for me, waiting it out felt like I would not be able to move on. So I basically narrowed it down to the first two options. And I decided to take the abortion pill. I've never done it before, never had an abortion, but I decided to do that. That weekend, I ended up taking that pill. And I can't tell you how it messes with your head to take a pill for an abortion that's for a wanted pregnancy. Highly do not recommend if you can avoid it. So that weekend I took it. It was excruciatingly painful physically and emotionally. I took a couple days off work just to recover from that. And I was planning to hold space for that and grieve. But unfortunately, that Wednesday, I basically learned that my role at work was going to be eliminated. And so it took away the opportunity for me to fully grieve for the miscarriage at that time. And my role was being eliminated at the end of the year. So this was in August at this point. So I had quite a few months to go, and we were still planning a wedding, right? So I was like trying to process loss of a baby, loss of a job, and we're getting married, and all of this happening at once. And I frankly didn't have the time to process any of it at all. I just kept moving just to survive. After the wedding was wonderful, the honeymoon was wonderful. In the new year, the first 2 weeks were great. I was like, I don't have a job. I have a nice severance. I'm just living life. It feels good. And I started thinking about, what do I want to do next? Do I want to look at maybe this type of role, or look at consulting or something like that? And suddenly my world just crashed down on me. And I ended up inadvertently hurting someone that I love. And that was a big sign to me that something wasn't right with me to be in this state. That was the first indicator of grief for me. I will say, at the time when everything happened in the summer, I cried, but it wasn't like this. This was like a deep sadness. And it could change from day to day, from moment to moment. And that's how I started my journey with grief.
Yeah, it's a lot to experience all at once. And like you
Yeah.
said, there's the highs, because as soon as you learn you're going to have a child, that's a high. And then there's your wedding, that's a high. And then all these other things that crash, and it could happen to anyone. It's a really tough situation. I'd love to understand the decision that you made, that first decision, because decisions are hard. Every decision has some consequence. So was that a solo decision?
I spoke to my husband. I guess he was my fiance, then fiance. I spoke to him about it. The doctor said it was a very personal choice. Some people with the DNC, the positive is one, you get numbed, and two, you can get the tissue tested to see if there was anything going on. And then with the pill, it's like I guess I want it done. You just expel it. But she said the pain level can vary among people. And so Ben, my husband, he said, this is your choice. What do you want to do? And I was like, I think I don't want to have a procedure. It sounds really medical and procedure-y. And so I decided at that point to take the pill.
I see. So you consulted him,
I did.
and then ultimately you had your own decision because of what sounded less hard for you personally.
Yeah, and he provided the support and the space to really have ownership of my body too, which I thought was really supportive of him, even though
Yeah,
it was
no,
like
for
our
sure.
pregnancy.
That's right. In this situation where obviously you were struggling a lot personally, you were trying to deal with your emotions and you felt like you hurt someone that you love.
Yeah.
And instantly you realized that was an indicator of something that you had to deal with. How did you respond in that situation? Maybe you said something maybe that you regret. What happened after that? And did the other person that you hurt understand your situation? Did you have to explain it to them what was going on so that they could not feel as attacked or hurt by what you said or did?
Yeah. At first, it was surface level. It was like a symptom of what was really going on. And I, at first, was thinking about what I did, and I convinced myself that it was because I'm trying to find work. It was because it had to do with trying to find a job or trying to find a way to earn income. So I convinced myself it was survival mode, and that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? There's these pieces. Unfortunately, I hurt someone in the meantime. And we talked about it, and I apologized, and I felt like I betrayed the person, but I felt like there was something more going on. It didn't feel like it was simply me freaking out about not having a job. It felt deeper than that because it had to do with deception and betrayal. That to me is like there's something there. And so at that point, I did tell them, like, helping them understand what I was going through. And at the same time, I knew that I needed help to figure out what exactly is going on. And I told them, and then I called my therapist, who I used to go to for a long time, but put on pause because I had made a lot of progress in my sort of like self-awareness, mental health journey. But at this point, I realized it was crisis mode and I needed help.
Your behavior changed. It wasn't normal for you to act in that way. And even though with that person, you explained the situation so that they didn't feel so bad about it, but ultimately you didn't want to be repeating that, because sometimes when we need the most people support and help is when we attack people the most.
Yeah.
Not because we want to, but because there's so much going on. It's just hard to process everything that's going on. And for you, then the solution was to seek out help externally, to find a professional to help you out in dealing with those situations. How did you also handle the conversations with other people around you since you were going through that?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, because at that time too, I had been like networking and having all these different meetings and figuring out what am I going to do next. And someone even offered to have this session of let's figure out what you really want to do. And it was going to be really deep. And I was excited. And I just had to say no. And that was hard. I had to, with some people, I was very honest. It ranged from telling them exactly what has been going on to I'm having some ups and downs. It's been tough, ranging to I'm having a mental health moment, ranging to I'm going to make something up because I don't know you that well, but I need my space. So I'm going to postpone this for a couple weeks. I personally prefer to be more honest and transparent, but when it's like a recruiter or something, I didn't want to be like, excuse me, I'm having a mental health moment. Can we talk next week? There was a range of responses depending on who I was talking to, but I made sure to let people know that I needed time and space.
So you knew what you wanted, you knew what you needed. And even though some of these people were actually trying to help you out with what you were sharing, that was your objective at the time.
Yeah.
So these recruiters or these people who wanted to set up these meetings and do these things, networking to help you as far as what they understood you needed or you were looking for. At the same time, you had this other side. You knew your boundaries, like you knew what you needed. And so you shared that with people. You communicated those boundaries in a nice way, but you did
Yeah.
so that you had what you needed in that moment.
Yeah. It wasn't necessarily easy. The other thing I forgot to add was that I did talk to my husband a little bit about how I was feeling and that I did need support. And he's the type of person that sometimes gives me what I need, not necessarily what I want. Maybe in that moment, I just wanted him to hug me and tell me everything was going to be okay. But sometimes he will do that, but he'll also say, he told me, I really, when you had this time after our wedding and the honeymoon, I wanted you to just create space for yourself so you would be able to process and grieve. And you just immediately started. So I want you to create space. I want you, so him actually giving me a little bit of a nudge, along with me seeing how I was doing, which was not well. I think both of those combined, and also him holding me accountable a little bit too, I think helped me set those boundaries as well.
Regarding your husband as well as other people around, specifically your husband, I don't want to
Yeah.
put him on the spot, but any people, any of these individuals, family, friends,
Yeah.
supporters, besides communicating, hey, I don't want this
Yeah.
meeting this week, I want it next week. Were there other ways that you educated them on what you wanted them to do to support you? Because I know that if I'm going through something, I usually have to communicate to others around me what I need from them. Otherwise, they're going to give me their love in a way that is not exactly what I need, at least in that moment. Did that happen to you? Like, or did they
Yeah.
just magically know exactly what to do all the
No.
time?
No, they don't magically know what to do all the time. There was actually, interestingly, two instances. One is more personal than the other. So one was like a career coach, and he was amazing and helping me prepare and getting to know myself. And I was like, oh, this is great. And then I was getting really overwhelmed with all the grief. And I told him straight up, I was like, look, I'm going through something. I need time. Can we pick this up like in a month? And he was like, okay. He's like, how can I be of the best support? And I was like, honestly, the sporadic checking in is very helpful to me. It helps me know that you care and that you're there. So that was a more professional type. And then I think this one was rather hard for me. It's a little bit more personal, but as I had experienced the miscarriage, we had to tell our parents. And I did tell my parents, and they were supportive enough. I didn't get the response that I was hoping from them. They were, oh, I'm sorry, you'll be okay. That was it. I needed a little bit more from my parents. And it was really bothering me. And so when I have a lot of feelings, I write these things called Lydia letters that are basically a way for me to process my feelings and then write them down. Sometimes I do send them because they're thoughtful, they express myself. So I ended up sending a note to both of my parents explaining exactly how I felt and that I needed their support, that I wish they would have called me. I wish that they would have checked in. And it was really terrifying to be able to send that because family relationships can be funny. I didn't know how they're going to respond, but the response was full of love and full of, we would do anything for you. Of course, we cared. We didn't know how much you wanted. So I think at that point, there was like a little bit of a balance, a learning for me too, around I could have told them sooner what I needed from them. You know what I mean? And I'm glad that I did when I did, but the love was there. That was important to know.
Yeah, and what's interesting because like you said, the love was there, but even if you said, I need your support, it wouldn't be enough because they wouldn't necessarily understand what that meant
Yeah, what does support look like for me right now?
for you right now, again, in
Yeah.
that moment. And
Yeah.
by writing it down, not only expressing your feelings because then they understood the severity of the situation,
Yeah.
but also saying, hey, I actually want you to call me every week.
Ask me how I'm doing.
Just give me some space to talk about
Yeah.
my feelings. And that at least clarifies. I make that mistake with my mom all the time. And it's the opposite. I want to make her feel considered and heard. We're both engineers by training. And so she'll communicate a problem and I go straight to problem solving mode. And typically a lot of men do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is not synchronous, it's asynchronous.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, to solve this, you need to do A, B, and C. And I'll never hear back from her because that's not what she wanted to hear. So it's one of those things. So it's nice that you found that. And through Lydia letters,
Yes.
you were able to express yourself. And it was funny. I mean, you talk about your parents. I'm talking about my mom here.
Yeah, let's do it.
In college, I left my home to study college in a different state. And first time living outside of your house, it's always a little bit stressful. And I'd do my Ivna letters, but it was more like Ivna emails, complaining, talking about all like the anxiety and the stress and all the bad things that were happening. She was really concerned with me all throughout my 20s because of Ivna letters. But that's wonderful, right? Because your parents could really understand what you were going through and also shows that you had a really good relationship with them to be able to open up in that way.
It was a risk. My parents have always seen me in one way. They haven't seen necessarily my self-awareness journey that I've been on to really become my own person and take up space. So that was a risk because they see me very differently than I think who I am.
Yeah.
Which is the thing with parents, right?
It is. They know little girl Lydia,
Yeah.
not a woman Lydia who has evolved, and you're always going to continue to evolve. And so they're a little bit disconnected from the current version of you, which is, I think, natural.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about the grief on the baby side.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about the grief on the job side.
Oh, yeah. That one hit me like a ton of bricks. It started off with this intense sense of loneliness because when you're at work, you have this built-in community. You have your coworkers that turn into friends. You bump into people in, I guess, when we had hallway conversations, you bump into people and it's like it brings you energy and you're just so excited. And I didn't have that. And of course, I was like, I would still see friends, but it's just not the same as this built-in sort of network. So it started out with loneliness, missing people. And then diving a little bit deeper into it, I started to realize I'm feeling like I don't have an identity anymore. My whole life, I've associated myself to some type of role, whether it's a daughter, whether it's a student, whether it's a worker at a company, an employee at a company. I was in this new space of, okay, I don't have a job. So what is my purpose? I don't know. I'm also newly married and I'm a wife. What the heck does that mean? I don't know, because my husband and I we are very intentional and serious about not doing things traditionally and creating our own definition of what marriage is. Our wedding was the same. It was not very traditional in some ways. I'm in this space of who am I? What do I have to offer to this world? Do I have anything to offer to this world? And that kind of sunk me down because I've always been also like valued for like the work that I do. I have a strong work ethic. I produce pretty good stuff, if I don't say so myself. And I've always been praised for that. And then without that sort of validation as well, which we shouldn't need, sometimes it's nice to have, I felt very lost. Not having a sense of self, that was really hard.
That's very hard. Your story just brought up a memory. I was in immigration status. I couldn't work. I couldn't study. I couldn't do anything for more than a year. And my identity as well was always associated with studying, working. That's how we were valued by society. And I remember being in this conversation. We went out to see some friends and I explained the situation. I couldn't do anything. She turned to me and said something that stick to my memory for years, and always with this very negative feeling of I'm a nothing because of what you're saying, the identity piece being associated with work. And what she said was, so does the government expect you to just rot and do nothing? It was such a strong word association. And I'm thinking, like, am I rotting?
I don't like that word association either.
Is that what I'm doing? Am I rotting?
Such a clear, like, how she sees the world, right? And how you bring value to the world.
Is that how she sees me? Is that how other people see me? And for me, it made me isolate myself further. I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to see people. I didn't want to see friends because I felt I would be judged. I don't know what your situation is, but it really permeated the entire social life because I didn't want to be seen. I don't know how that was for you and how you found path to still be yourself and feel comfortable in your own skin. And who are the people that were part of that helped you or have helped you be comfortable with redefining who you are for yourself, but also just feeling comfortable in that process?
So there's different people in my life, different relationships. Right after I sunk into this, I was so thankful that I was going to be able to see one of my best friends who she went through the ringer last year. Like, the company went under, like, then she had 2 other jobs that were just miserable. So she was unemployed as well after having had a really rough year just in the job market. And we just had 6 hours together where I told her, I'm getting emotional, everything that was happening, how hard it was, and how I don't feel like myself, and how I'm hurting people, and I know all these things. And I knew that she would understand because she's also type A, also has been a workaholic, totally finds value in work and doing. And so I knew right away that I knew she would understand. And she did. And she shared what was going on with her. But it was just like this conversation that I needed.
Yeah.
That was really important to know that someone understood exactly what was happening in terms of like identity and self. So that was one really important piece. I wouldn't say I got deep with all my friends. There was one day where I took my dog to the dog park, and I had a feeling that my dad might be walking their dog there at that time because he's retired, lives the life, can't go. But he usually has a very like routine. I go to the grocery store, then I take the dog out, then I do this. And he was there, and I hugged him. I basically started crying, and he was like, what's happening? What's going on? And it was like one of those moments where I needed my parents too. And it's different because they also have a very different mentality. And I was starting to tell him how, I feel like I don't have an identity. And he's like, I get it. I've worked my whole life. I've always associated. His retirement was hard. And then what was really interesting was we started talking about what could be next. And I was like, I've been talking to a consulting company and I have a soft offer from them. He's, oh, you should take it. You should take it. And I was like, I think it's really important for me to listen to myself and really allow myself the space to really first find out what it is that I really want to do, and then listen to my body around the next opportunity and what is it telling me. And the consulting is like It's not a, yeah, I want that. It's like, I could do it, which gives me pause. And I was trying to explain that to him. And he was like, wow, that is such a different way that I would look at it. I would be in fear of like opportunities passing me by. And I was like, yeah, I know that can happen. I'm trying to have more of a growth and abundance mindset that the right thing will come when it's the right time. It was an interesting opportunity. It's like I needed. I've always been close with my dad. So I wanted to see my dad, but also like sharing what I was going through, but also pushing back on his perspective on things as well, which was a way of asserting who I am today. So those were a couple examples. I also worked a lot with my therapist to find what are things that I like to do, not do for someone else, but what are things that I love? And music has been a big part of my life. I've always been in bands, play the trumpet. So not like super cool, but like classical. And I played the piano and I bought a keyboard from Amazon. I got my trumpet cleaned so that I could start playing again and bring that part of myself back. I also forgot that I spent a couple years abroad in Spain and that I love speaking Spanish. And so I started to try and find ways to practice that again, that bring that part of my brain forward, because I also associate Spanish and Spain with being abroad and really just being on my own and figuring out who I am. So there's really positive imagery and feelings that come when I'm in this space of trying to speak Spanish.
Wow, you said so many wonderful things there. And I love that little moment. That was funny. For those of you who didn't see the video, who are only listening, Lydia just it was so much energy she puts. Like the job is not, it's not this yet. So a couple of ways that you went about finding that support that you needed. The one was finding people close to you that had gone through a very similar situation, and just being completely frank. You had a 6-hour conversation, made you feel heard and understood, like you're not alone. Sometimes that's a friend, sometimes it's a group and people that we don't know, right? It's a meetup. I don't know. There's so many different ways to find
someone
those
with a
people.
similar experience, then you can immediately relate. Absolutely.
Can relate. Yeah. That's a really great one because it'll be relatable. You won't feel alone, and you're not afraid of the judgment that people are going to judge you for that feeling that you had in that situation. And then with the therapist, they'll guide you through what you can do. In that case, you found a little bit of your happy place. A little bit of
me. Yeah.
A little bit of you. You have your husband supporting you.
Yes.
And having that, being open and having those open conversations with him. And then really expressing to your parents what you were seeking out, what you needed from them, which were those calls, which were your parents and your coach expressing, hey, just show up, just call me, just ask me how I'm doing.
Yeah.
That's all I need from you. And then from your dad specifically, you wanted a little bit of his perspective, but at the same time, you said something about pushing back or evaluating and saying no to certain things that he said or disagreeing. You asserted who you are. And it probably even helps you define a little bit more who you are by exclusion.
I struggled a lot growing up with just, I'll call it what it is, codependence, and just really wanting to meet my parents' expectations. Always a fear of not meeting them. Me pushing back on my dad and his opinions is actually like very big. It's not a small thing. I would not have done it probably 10 or 15 years ago. I'd be like, you're right. I need to go find another job right now. I better take the first thing that comes my way. So for me to be like, actually, I don't think that's right for me. And he respected that. That to me was like, I really liked that.
Feels good, right? I'm the same.
Yeah.
I was always very, it goes beyond respect. It's just following whatever they say.
Yeah.
And there's this joke in my family. Whenever I disagree with my dad, there's this joke that they say, it's my effing life.
Yeah.
Because the first time I pushed back on something that my dad said, it was about a job. He wanted me to take a certain job. I didn't want to. I was trembling and anxiety and stressed, and he was pushing and pushing. And I said, it's my effing life, crying, running to my room, locking the door. But the same as you, except in your case was more civilized, he did respect me after that
Mm,
a lot more. And it's a way of creating a bit of separation. And with that
yeah.
separation, it helps us redefine who we are. So I
Mhm.
completely get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot around the topic.
Yeah.
Are any final thoughts on grief and on the process?
The only thing I would say is grief shows up when you least expect it. Takes no prisoners. No, I'm just kidding. It shows up in different ways too, like hurting somebody. It also is crying, but there's gratitude in there too. There's all the feelings happen in this umbrella of grief, which I think is it's just like one word to explain like a journey. And it never ends, but you learn to say hello, welcome it, and understand that it's important and you will move through it.
Yeah, and I like that. You welcome it and figure out how to move through it and give it the time that it needs.
Yeah, like it's there for a reason. Saying it's knocking at your door. Why don't you come in and have some tea instead of me continuing to push you out? If I don't welcome you in, you're going to come in whether I want you or not.
That is so true. Thank you so much, Lydia, for sharing a lot of your personal journey with grief in the process, both in your family situation as well as professionally. A lot of people have experienced or are experiencing one of those two things.
Mhm.
So thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure. And I hope that the stories resonate with at least one person.
For sure they will. I can already think of a couple people that it will resonate with. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.